Hello and welcome to Talk Truth. My name is Corey Huntsberger. I've got Alan Huntsberger in the studio, and he's back. Dad, how you feeling? You still got that cough?
Well, once in a while it pops up, but I'm doing great. Thank you for everybody's thoughts and prayers.
Once in a
It
while.
just goes to show you that even when you're been working hard and having good health, you can still get a bug. The difference is, I think, the length of how long that bug lasts in your body. So
you should be on the phone with Alan. It's like all of a sudden, hello, and it's like, are you okay? You need me to call the doctor?
Don't do that. You're going to cause me to start to cough again.
Well, if you've got to mute your mic and cough a little bit, you can. Let's start with our foundational verse. We do it every day. The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord. For he laid its foundation on the seas and established it on the river. Psalm 24, 1 and 2. We go with a foundational verse, Dad, because everyone's trying to take control of the earth. You know what I mean? Everyone says this is mine. You can't do this. You can't do that. They spray the skies with a bunch of junk, and we just want a foundation. No. Let's all start off where we're all equal. The earth belongs to the Lord. He's the creator of it. Start from there, right?
Yeah. The interesting thing, and this might be a little different take on it, but it's kind of interesting. I go for about a 6K walk every morning, and obviously there's sometimes I'm pretty early on the trail, but there's sometimes other people walking as well. And generally, when people walk, they come up to you, they look straight down at their feet on the path. And they look straight ahead, and they don't say hi or good morning or anything. They just pretend like you're not there. And it's like a dehumanizing of the human, of the man, of the woman, or whatever.
Yeah.
So every morning, if you're walking and you meet me and you're looking down and everything else, all of a sudden you're going to hear good morning, and they kind of good morning. But it's kind of interesting how we're in a world today where we don't really recognize that we all have been created by the Lord God Almighty, and we're made in His image, and we're so similar, whether we're from the United States,
Sure.
Canada, or anywhere around the world. It's really interesting, and I mean, God so loved the world, and we need to love the world as well. So I'm encouraging people that when you walk by somebody, even though they're not looking at you and probably not going to say anything, speak up and say good morning or good afternoon or hello.
Can't hurt, right? Yeah.
I don't think so, no.
Well, let's get on to our show. I'm excited. She's brand new to the show. She's never been on before. Her name is Shaz Khan. She wrote a book. It's called The Ultimate Vaccine Timeline, a fact-packed history of vaccines and their makers. Alan, you and I have been accused that this show is not scientific at all. The things that you guys are saying is just garbage. But we continue to have researchers and scientists and lawyers and everyone under the sun talk to us about the topic that we're bringing up. Today will be vaccines. We're going to have Shaz on. Shaz, welcome to the show. Appreciate you being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
Why don't you just give us a little bit about who you are? This is your first time on the show, so our viewers get to know who you are and what you're about.
Hi, so I'm an independent researcher based here in Switzerland. I grew up in the UK, so most of my research is actually at the British Library and the National Archives, but I've also done quite a bit of research here in the Swiss archives. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not even a mother. But my interest in vaccines came about after the death of my dad following a flu shot. So that's kind of what pushed me into the whole research of vaccines, of which I didn't know anything about, to be quite honest. And the more I found out, the more I was outraged. And then the more documents I found in the National Archives from the government, the more I realized, hang on a minute, this has to be shared with the public, because I think most people don't really have the patience to spend time in libraries anymore. But there's a lot of information out there that needs to be disclosed.
Agreed.
We're sorry you lost your father. Did he pass away almost directly after he took the flu shot?
It wasn't directly. It was about 2 months after he took it, but just there were some very strange symptoms that he had that were all neurological. I mean, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. He never smoked in his life, and he didn't have any respiratory issues. He only had neurological problems, which already for me was very strange. I mean, he was in the UK in the NHS system, which we know is badly underfunded and understaffed. There were just so many things that didn't add up. And then I found out after his death that actually my stepmom told me he got a flu jab 2 months before and that he had balance issues after the flu jab. So that was my starting point. The entry point was to read the package inserts from the flu vaccines to see, well, what kind of side effects are. And then one of the most obvious and acknowledged side effects are neurological issues. So this, I didn't know this because obviously here I think like everywhere else, they push the flu vaccine every year on pregnant women, now even on children since COVID, and on elderly people in the old people's homes. It's part of the kind of like immunization schedule they have for old people. So I was very concerned by what I found out already from the flu vaccine, and that triggered me to go look at the other ones.
Well, this is a big topic, and there's lots of places we can start. I'm just going to start off with one. There's a perception out there that everyone says that vaccines are safe and effective. We hear that over and over again. And when I did a little bit of looking into it, it becomes way back. A lot of people believe back when they first started, it was there to help save lives. So and I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if there ever once was a good vaccine, back in history, and then now it's warped into something that's horrific and dangerous. I'm going to throw that out there and let you just kind of start a little bit about your book. And since it's a timeline, I'm sure you're going to start. There's got to be some history that at the very beginning, right?
Yeah, well, I started from a historical approach because that was kind of I love history, and you need to understand where you've been to understand where we've got. So,
Yep.
as you said yourself, I mean, the first vaccine that we're all very aware of is a smallpox vaccine. That was the one that we heralded as having eradicated smallpox in the 1970s, declared eradicated in the 1980s. But it's a vaccine that's been used since the 1800s. In different forms. Nobody's really been able to nail down exactly what was in it because you have to remember the science at the time was very, very crude. We didn't have any ways of checking purity of the fluids that were trying to scratch into people. And then rapidly, obviously, we have Louis Pasteur who came along and he developed the rabies vaccine. He developed chicken cholera vaccine. He was accredited as well of being kind of like the father of germ theory. But even at this time as well, it was very, very hard to guarantee purified product, to really know what we were giving to people. We had no electron microscopes back then to check for viruses. And so a lot of the technology and the basis for vaccination was based on supposition, on presumptions and speculation, I would say. And I was actually quite surprised to find out that in the 1910s, we already had very many products on the market. So there was a vaccine for acne, there was a vaccine for leprosy, there was a vaccine for hay fever. There were loads of different vaccine products. And remember, again, there were no regulatory bodies at this time. I mean, the Biologics Act started in 1902. The Biologics Control Act, sorry, in the US, and the first licensed vaccine was for a smallpox vaccine, but there were many other products on the market, as I said, in 1910 already. Not mandatory. Admittedly, smallpox vaccine and diphtheria were the only two that really kind of made mandatory, but obviously they were marketed worldwide through companies like Burroughs Wellcome, who were based in the UK, Park Davis, and HK Mulford. So they already had a worldwide distribution network at the beginning of the 20th century.
How has vaccine technologies changed and evolved over the centuries?
So we have now more sophisticated technologies. Obviously, the biotech industry in the 1970s completely changed the face of how we develop vaccines. So it's interesting because the technology is way more sophisticated. We don't use as many live animals as we used to anymore. However, the principle still remains the same, which is we're trying to induce the body to produce antibodies, which are supposed to protect us against any future infection. So the idea is the same. A vaccine is a controlled substance, a controlled injection of a pathogen. You're not supposed to get sick. However, your body's supposed to remember and protect you the next time you're exposed. So that hasn't changed. Funnily enough, it seems in my opinion, that the narrative has even been kind of like just molded around that basic concept, which hasn't changed. And then the sophistication of the technologies, biotech, using now mRNA technology, genetic engineering. This is the future because it's much cheaper as well for the pharmaceutical companies. They can develop vaccines much quicker, as we've seen with the so-called COVID vaccine. And it's very easy for them just to take, the mRNA code. They want to switch it. Like, I mean, the mRNA vaccine has now got the same kind of status as a flu vaccine, which, if you're aware, the WHO decides on what strain they're going to use for this year's flu vaccine campaign, and then they just adapt the strain, but they don't put the vaccine through all the testing because it's assumed that it's already safe because we've used it for years. There are two types: there's the egg-based and then the cell-based. And now the mRNA vaccine has been given pretty much that same status in the sense that they just have to tweak what the actual code is, and they still can pass it through the regulatory agencies without having to pass through clinical trials like they did initially, even though we only had 2 months of data when it was brought to market, but it was under an emergency use authorization. And today now it's just given a regular authorization. So the technology is definitely developed. I mean, the amount of I don't know, it's quite frightening and interesting at the same time when you look how many people are involved in the field of vaccine development and how many different specialties there are. And now, as I said, with the biotech industry, there is just a massive market for patented recombinant cellular products, which are now incorporated. I mean, the measles MMR vaccine, there's a recombinant derivative of human blood. Uh, it is very
I'm
sophisticated, but is it safer? I'm not so sure.
I'm sure you're aware of Bobby Kennedy, and of course the work that he's doing now as Secretary of Health in the United States. And one of the things that he keeps coming up with is that, with all the vaccines, the question that we need to ask ourselves is: Are our children, for example, healthier today than they were 60 years ago, or are they got more health problems today than they did 60 years ago? And I think the conclusion is that children are more sickly and have more problems with various concerns the more vaccines they take. Is that the research that you kind of found?
So I have to admit, I haven't actually found any research that confirmed that because I was looking specifically at different vaccines in history and not so much the actual studies around once they're on the market. But I've noticed that obviously in the research that I've done around this book and my general interest. And yeah, what's missing is that unvaxxed vax study by the government over a good long time to see what the long-term effects are, because we never looked at the long-term effects. We only look at short-term. And it seems quite clear that children now, even in Switzerland, where vaccination is not mandatory, but we have a high uptake, there are a lot more chronic issues with children. I mean, we've just had a children's hospital open up here recently in Lausanne, which is specializing in cancer and autoimmune diseases and all these kinds of allergies and ADHD, all these kinds of conditions that we didn't see so much about 30, 40 years ago. At least when I was a kid growing up, we didn't have that many sick kids. I mean, I have to be honest, it's one of the reasons why I decided not to have children is they're sick all the time. And I never understood really why until it clicked that, oh, hang on a minute. Are the vaccines causing like an underlying weakness, which means they're much more susceptible to other problems? And is it creating, well, underlying autoimmune conditions, which you have for life?
Yeah. What
So I
did you,
can't answer.
yeah.
Sorry.
Let me ask you this. When we go into this world, it's like this massive circle. Like everyone's scratching everyone else's back from the the guys that get like the grants to the universities to the vaccines to the manufacturers to the politicians that push it out. Can you tell us a little bit? Have you seen that in your research that this is like a big boy rich guys club and they're all scratching each other's back and pushing it out on us? And what did you find in that circle?
Well, that seems very, I mean, obviously we know that it's been men in general who have been establishing policy from the early even 1900s. Obviously women didn't have much of a position at that back in those days. But it was definitely already colonial countries which had the power of implementing their, their tropical institutes abroad and testing on their on their workforce, sorry. And then we have Rockefeller. Obviously, you can't talk about the pharmaceutical industry and vaccines without bringing up the Rockefeller Institute and the foundation, which have financed a lot of not only research on vaccines, but also on research on medical education, and basically infiltrated the academic arena through there by obviously giving schools money and in exchange having seats on the board, being able to decide on policy or at least influence policy. So that's been very clearly from the beginning of the 20th century for sure. And then government has just kind of allowed pharmaceutical interests and private interests to infiltrate what I would say is public research. So, like in the US, you have the 1980 Bayh-Dole Act, which allowed public funding to be used for private patented products. So, if NIH is given a certain university like $30 million and out of that comes out of a product, the companies are then allowed to patent that and make a profit, even though it was the actual American people who paid for it. So all these policies, which I also saw definitely in researching, helped really basically back up what we now see, which is it's a boys' club. I would say mainly a boys' club, even though there's now more and more women.
Yeah.
But definitely all the policies in place, the influence of the medical curriculum, and even the influence of the doctors, the influence of policy, and even insurance companies. It's kind of like a whole web where they've managed to put everything in place so it works for them. I would call it definitely a very well-oiled machine.
Yeah, we've seen that, especially there's doctors that, even in licensing, right? Like if a doctor doesn't toe the line, we're going to pull your license and then you're not going to be a doctor anymore. Like it seems to be all intertwined. Let me ask you this. Is there any vaccine that through your research seems okay in your mind? Because a lot of people, tetanus, right? You step on a nail, go get a tetanus shot. You know what I mean? Or, flu vaccine. We have a lot of seniors that thought, I'm going to go get the flu vaccine. I've gotten it for years. You have your own personal story, tragic story with your father. Did you find anything in there that, or was it all shady from the very, very, very beginning? Has the whole thing been shady?
Well, to be honest, I kind of thought the tetanus vaccine was like, if you're going to get one, you should get the tetanus vaccine.
Right.
And I came out of there realizing actually that's probably the most useless one because you can't even immunize yourself against tetanus because it's something that you can get multiple times. And an example is I've received tetanus shots several times and I've received it after the fact because I was attacked by a dog and they gave me, a tetanus shot after the accident. So again, I really can't say that I have found any vaccine that seems to be particularly effective. What does stand out, I would say, is the measles vaccine as far as preventing infection. But then you have to weigh it against what are the possible outcomes there are of the measles vaccine. And well, knowing that you can only get it as the triple MMR at the moment, apart from in Switzerland and in certain countries in Asia, you can still get it as a single measles or a measles rubella, but not with the mumps component. But still, I would prefer my kid gets measles and has that lifelong protection than whatever potential risks from that vaccine. And the flu shot, when I went to Oxford University to do a 1 week vaccinology course, I was actually quite shocked that they all agreed the flu shot was pretty useless. And my question was, well, why are we still giving it to people, especially to pregnant women and to people in the workforce and in hospitals, etc.? And they said it's better than nothing. But I'm sorry, something with a 20 to 30% efficacy rate is not better than nothing when you have to consider, again, the risks, especially for pregnant women. I think I was outraged when I saw the lack of research, especially safety research, when it comes to pregnant women and vaccines that we recommend to them. So frankly, unfortunately, if I was a parent and I had a kid right now, I wouldn't give them any. But that's obviously my personal choice. I would have to take the consequences. In Switzerland, it's not mandatory, but if there is a measles outbreak, for instance, your kid is excluded from school for 21 days. So there are obviously certain sacrifices you have to make as a working parent to make those decisions. But at this point, and I've got friends who have got unvaccinated kids, and I see how healthy they are compared to the vaccinated. So again, it's not science; it's just anecdotal evidence that I can see. But even the people that have done the unvax studies, they seem to come out with a lot less chronic issues with the unvaccinated population compared to the vaccinated.
So what you know now compared to what you didn't know before your father took a cold vaccine shot. What would you tell your father now if he was alive and thinking about getting a cold vaccine shot?
I said quite simply, don't get it. You don't need it. If you want to prevent yourself from getting the flu, there are plenty of other ways to do that. I mean, vitamin D, zinc, vitamin C. I mean, the choices are abundant. But getting a flu shot, it's like playing Russian roulette, basically, especially at that age. And especially if he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, like literally a month afterwards. So he would have already been quite sick at that point. So I would say, no, you don't need a flu shot. Absolutely not. It's a waste of time, and it's a waste of money, and it's a waste of your potential health for the rest of your life.
Mm.
Mm.
Let me ask you this. We know this. You spent the time researching it. And by the way, when you answer this, I want to know first answer, how long did you research for your book? Why is this still happening? Why is this charade still going on? I mean, like, we could see you've got history, you can follow the data. I mean, there's personal testimonies, there's personal injuries, there's personal deaths. But this whole charade just continues marching forward. Like, I don't even know. Well, why do you think this continues? Is it just because of the money? It's just so big, so powerful, so much money's involved. They're going to continue to lie and to push it on people, or do you think we'll ever get out of this massive cycle of this mind? I call it like a mind psych that we're on right now. Why do you think this continues with everything that and other doctors and other scientists around the world know? But we continue to move forward like we're just living in La La Land.
Well, it's interesting. There were already doctors in the 1800s who predicted that, like, in 50 years, we're going to dump the whole vaccine program because we're going to realize how dangerous it is. And here we are, 150 years later, and we're even more accelerated on the program. I don't think it's just a question of money. Obviously, the propaganda, the persistent disinformation, also on a historical level, like we all learned in school, vaccines save lives. They saved us from polio. They saved us from smallpox. Breaking down that programming is very difficult, and for many people, it's like questioning the good intentions of your parents, because we see our authorities as, also kind of having an authority figure looking after us. If we can't rely on the public health authorities to give us accurate information, well, that's incredibly destabilizing. So I think it's money, but it's very hard for them to admit their mistakes because they're afraid that the whole immunization program would fall apart. And I think it would, especially with what we've seen with this COVID product. If they were to turn around and say, hey, we made a big mistake, we actually have to go back to the drawing board and reconsider the safety and efficacy of these vaccines. In the meantime, they're going to lose pretty much everybody. And they're scared of measles outbreaks, and they're scared of pertussis outbreaks. But I'm not sure that that's really what is the issue. I could go down a very nefarious kind of line of thinking and say, well, maybe they want us to continue getting vaccinated because it keeps us being clients to the pharmaceutical industry for the rest of our lives. Because if it makes us sicker, well, then we're more reliant on their industry. And obviously, their industry dies if we're if we're in good health. I mean, I personally haven't taken a single medication in over 10 years now, and that's also the length of the research that I've done in this book is 10 years. And it wasn't because I'm against the pharmaceutical industry. There are many miraculous products that pharmaceutical industry has come out with, and thank God we have, urgent care and trauma care. I wouldn't be alive if there wasn't. But there are a lot of products I think we're automatically programmed to believe we need, but we don't. We just need to be able to look after ourselves better lifestyle, better, intake of vitamins and minerals and clean food and clean air and exercise. But I think it's a mixture. I would say money, power, losing faith of the public, because if the immunization, I mean, think about it. If the whole program fell to pieces, that's it for the public health authorities. Like, the CDC can kiss their budget completely goodbye. I think most other public health authorities can their budgets could buy because they all kind of specialize in infectious disease more than chronic disease. And this is what I hope that Kennedy is able to achieve with the HHS, is to bring that focus back to chronic diseases, which is what is really costing healthcare enormous. We're Switzerland, we're right behind you in the US with regards to healthcare costs. And they're not from infectious diseases, it's from chronic disease, cancer, heart disease, lung disease. It's from these kinds of problems, not at all infectious diseases. So money is definitely a factor, but I think there's something more to it for
Well,
sure.
they did it with smoking. I'm still old enough to remember when smoking was healthy and all the doctors were recommending what cigarettes to buy that are healthy. And so they turned on the cigarette thing. So maybe, hopefully, there's hope for the vaccine thing. The book is called The Ultimate Vaccine Timeline, a fact-packed history of vaccines and their makers. Thank you so much, Shaz, for being on the show. We really appreciate you, and we'll have you back.
Thank you, Corey and Alan. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, great guest, Alan. You remember, we're just under this psychological warfare. That's what I believe. It's a battle for the mind. And this is why people need to get into relationship with Christ and renew their mind and get their mind renewed. Because, Alan, I remember, in the old days, they used to have, if there was a nuclear attack, they used to do drills in school where kids would hide under their desk. What is a hiding under your desk in the middle of a nuclear bomb going to do? Nothing. You're going to still be evaporated. But it's generational, Alan. This is generational. The psychological thing that people have been under. It's been happening for years, and we have to set ourselves free. And I think one of the only ways people can do it is you really got to get your relationship with Christ strong. We're giving away a free booklet called The Living Stone: A Journey of Transformation. It's yours free. All you got to do is go to our website, gotalktruth.com, click on resources. You can order it there. Get the booklet, start building your relationship with Christ, start renewing your mind, right?
Yep, that's our only answer. Our only answer is to draw near to God, and He'll draw near to us. We got to get back to God, because, otherwise you're going to be jumping all over the place and following after this trail and that trail. But it's really God's world, and He has a plan for your life. And once you get on that, you couldn't be more happy and more satisfied and more comforted in that whole process.
If you'd like to support our show, we are viewer supported. You can go to our website, gotalktruth.com, click on donate. You can give digitally that way. If you'd like to do it through the mail, you can. You can make your check payable to Heritage Christian Ministries Association and send it to 246 Stewart Green, Southwest, Suite 3260, Calgary, Alberta, T3H3C8. If you're in the U.S., you can send it to 4904 South Power Road, Suite 103-152, Mesa, Arizona, 85212. And if you'd like prayer, you can call our toll-free prayer line anytime in Canada, 1-800-915-0056. If you're in the U.S., you can call 1-800-445-3450. All right, Dad, we're out of time. We'll see you guys later.
Love you.